Welcome everyone.
Hello.
Samir and Prasad here.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So again, today we are back here with a new technology. I mean, we all know when it comes to the UI technologies, things like React have been massively popular, a very large developer base, etc. We also saw something like Next.js is coming up and picking up speed quite a lot. But there is another one called Svelte, which has become quite popular. A Dev survey seems to show that it was one of the hot technologies. So we are here to kind of understand what is Svelte all about, and that's where I think we start with that, Prasad, as the basic question: what is Svelte, and what does it offer to us?
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So, Samir, typically, if we have to compare this new in the sense we are covering it new actually. It's there for
Yeah.
last 3-4 years, but compared to React, yes, one can say that it's fairly new technology. So again, it is used to build web applications, but then the overall approach of building the application is a bit different as compared to React and Vue. So that's the fundamental difference. So the key thing what happens as far as the React and Vue is concerned, there is something like runtime or a library, the JavaScript library, which one embeds or which one refers in a HTML file, and then you get access to entire React API, and then one can code using the different constructs which are available. So whenever you have a page where it is being referred, or whenever you have a React components that is being powered by the library, and the whole thing runs in the browser. So that's how it has been structured. But Svelte took a little different approach. So what they really did is, instead of having a library and then your client side code using that library for rendering purpose or reactivity, etc., what they really do is they have a step called as compilation. So what they really do is, again, the coding is in terms of declarative components, and then those components, they get converted at compile time to a very efficient JavaScript code, and then that particular JavaScript code is sent to the browser. So nothing happens in the browser. So there is no reference file in the browser. So whenever you build, depending upon the component definition, it will create a JavaScript code, pure JavaScript code, and then it will send it to the browser for execution. So what browser really gets is simple JavaScript, but is highly efficient, and then it clinically updates the DOM whenever anything in UI changes. So this is the fundamental difference. So there is absolutely no reference library in Svelte. So there's a totally different way of looking at this UI or a web application building challenges or building problems. So it's fairly different
Okay.
as compared to that. Yeah. So I can say that
Interesting.
one can say it's a totally radical new approach to build a user
Yeah.
interface as compared to React or Vue, etc. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I kind of caught a few things, which you're mentioning, and I think one of the things which struck me was that I think the way you code seems to be very different, because there is no library to really mug up and master and code to the library. You don't have to do that, which means my code must be very different looking or very hopefully simplified. I mean, what's
Yeah.
your feeling or what's
Yeah,
your finding?
actually, what the whole philosophy of this is basically, as far as the library is concerned, you don't refer to library directly, but then the entire coding is in the components which developers are familiar with. Like, for example, you code using HTML construct, CSS, and JavaScript, and there is a bit of more Svelte specific code which is there, but predominantly the coding is limited to these three. So one doesn't have to learn a different API or a different library. So that's the fundamental thing which Svelte people or Svelte what you can say Svelte developers, they came. And then
Yeah.
because of that, what really happens is the amount of code which is really required to implement a certain UI functionality, it's far less. So less coding is one of the biggest point which is sort of promoted or by Svelte. So as compared to other components or other component libraries like React or Vue, the amount of coding which one has to do is far less. Like, in fact, they claim that you have to write about 40% less code as compared to React component. Of course, I think
Okay.
that will change from situation to situation, but that's what
Exactly.
their major, what you can say, the feature point is. And I think the main thing, the why it is possible is because there is very less boilerplate code. That complexity is hidden from the developer. So because let's say if you are coding it in React, then there is a good amount of boilerplate code.
Absolutely.
Let's say if you are implementing hooks and then you have to follow that pattern and implement your logic into that. So all that boilerplate code is not there. I think that is the fundamental advantage.
Mm.
Then you don't have anything like JSX and all that, so you can write in pure HTML, CSS, and a JavaScript which you are familiar with. And because of that, the whole code becomes uh, less and as well as more readable and in a familiar language which a developer is used to. So that's, I think, the biggest advantage of Svelte is.
Okay. Okay. So you also mentioned readability. So it's not just less efforts, less coding efforts, or less boilerplate code, but also readability, right? Okay.
Absolutely,
That is
absolutely,
interesting. Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Because many times, if I look at the React code, it's a little tricky. You know, you have to figure out which hooks calls what is updating what, right? So this, yeah. Okay.
Absolutely,
Cool.
absolutely. That's
Hmm.
that's the quite a challenge. In fact,
Hmm.
compared to React class components, now the React function components and hooks, there is definitely a very big improvement.
Yeah,
But still,
correct.
it's a little bit tricky to understand for any new developer. And somebody who is
Yeah.
very familiar with only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, for them, the learning curve is a bit steep. So that's where they have tried to address. So that's like one of the feature of Svelte.
Right. Okay. Okay. So thing is, okay, I don't have a library or a framework, whatever. I don't have a library, which is fine. But you also said, I mean, at the end of the day, my code has to execute it. It has to do something. There has to be underlying JavaScript. And you talked about compilation. So can you explain a bit like how it actually works? In my mind, unless there is JavaScript, nothing can run in the browser, right? So
Yeah.
what's happening behind the
Yeah.
scene? Yeah.
Yeah, fine. Actually, this compiler is a very interesting terminology which they have used.
Huh.
So it is not
Hmm.
generating any bytecode or anything of that sort. In fact,
Right.
what it really generates is it takes your declarative components which are written in Svelte component and then convert into a very efficient JavaScript only. So it's like
Hmm.
from their declarative component style or whatever the JavaScript which is written. So they take HTML, they take CSS, they take JavaScript from our Svelte component code. Now we are going to look at a sample code very soon, so
Okay.
that these things
Yeah.
will become very clear. But they take that
Hmm.
and then they compile it into a very efficient JavaScript. So that is, so let's say if whatever you are doing inside that component, whatever is required, only that much JavaScript is generated, and then that is
Right.
sent to the browser. So that's what
Okay.
the compilation step is all about. And then it updates the DOM directly. So that is another advantage. That so this is what
Okay.
the compilation step is all about. So it's like you take Svelte components and build small JavaScript modules which gets loaded into a browser, and then they implement your functionality. And then because you are
Got
doing
it.
compiling, naturally you get advantage of compilation. Like for example, you can statically analyze the entire component template and then ensure that very bare minimum JavaScript is sent to the browser, and then it's very efficient, and naturally it is very fast. So you need less power, you need less bandwidth. So that's the biggest advantage of Svelte compiler is. And because it is updating the DOM directly, there is no concept of virtual DOM. So typically in case of React, we have a pattern of virtual DOM. So you don't directly deal
Yes.
with the browser DOM, but you in that pattern you deal with this virtual DOM, and then React takes care of keeping the virtual DOM and DOM in sync. So here there is nothing like that. Whatever the JavaScript which is generated by the compiler, it straight away updates the DOM, but in a very surgical manner and in a very precise manner. So that's why by definition or by design, it is far more efficient and performant as compared to the other frameworks. So, in fact, many
Okay.
times this 12 people say that, okay, like, are we is virtual DOM is fast? Then say, okay, it is not fast, but it is fast enough for the developers. But Svelte, it is fast by design because there is no virtual
By
DOM.
design.
So that's
Got
the
it. Yeah.
major advantage of this Svelte
Hmm.
framework.
Kind of explains it to a level, and we'll also like to look at some example. But before we go there, right? I had another thing in mind. Whatever you mentioned, like, see, if I look at React, right? I think with the latest React hooks and all, I think you have to learn a lot of things, and it's pretty powerful, like state management, right? How do you manage your variables, because you're building various components, right? So each component has to manage its states. So there are concepts of callbacks with React. You become familiar with it. Now there are side effects, use effects and all that, right? So you manage that. So it's very, very well designed. But all these aspects of state management and all, or inter component communication, how is that handled?
Yeah, yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
that's absolutely. So, in fact, that's the third major area where it is different as compared to React. So,
Mm.
before going into the this comparison of React or Svelte, like generally, let's understand what exactly one means by very high level reactivity means. So, reactivity really means with you're keeping in your DOM in sync with the application state. Like for example, if anything in changes in the application, then DOM should get changed, and so the UI will get updated. Now it could be multiple ways it may get changed. So it may fetch data from the server and may update something. The end user may key in something and something may get changed. So all those things is part of the reactivity of the application. And all these modern web applications, they have to be really highly reactive, because otherwise the user will not really like to use the application. So that's the very key part of these applications. And as you have rightly mentioned, like React is a very powerful framework, and then they have implemented entire this reactivity by using various features such as hooks. Like it could be as simple as that your component variables, like how to keep in sync. So or basically how to maintain a state inside a component across the rendering. So you have a use state hook, or maybe there are effects. Maybe there is a hook called as use effect, which is like after rendering it is going to execute some code. Maybe there is a memo. So all those hooks are there, and using that you implement a reactivity in the application. So that is great, very very powerful. But the main difference between React and Svelte is that what Svelte really did is they tried to remove as much as boilerplate code as possible. So suppose if I want to implement
Okay.
a certain feature, let's say a state management. So in case of state management, what really we are doing at the basic level is we have a variable, and then we are setting some value to that particular variable, and then that value is available. So in case of React, then you have to use state hook. Then there is a function which is going to set that value, and so on so forth. But here, that particular pattern is little bit difficult. I will not say difficult, but little complex to understand until you get familiar with it. But the most
Yeah.
easy thing for all of us to understand is fine. I have a variable and I have a set of value to that. So just say
Yeah.
let I is equal to 2. So that is really a very simple thing to understand, and then the value will keep on changing. So that's what Svelte is trying to do. So in case of Svelte, the state management is absolutely very very simple, as if you are setting a value to a variable. And then there
Correct.
are
Yeah.
other interesting things about reactivity. And then rather than talking about it, I think probably I will actually show it on the screen, because it is a little bit difficult to
Yeah.
describe it on
No,
in a
absolutely.
text manner.
Yeah, I mean that's what I thought. I think so far all this sounds very interesting and pretty
Yeah,
good
yeah,
to hear
yeah.
about. But I think let's look at something so that we
Absolutely,
can
absolutely.
really get a feel of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what we'll do is we'll actually have a look at a small snippet, so that will give us an idea
Mhm.
how the Svelte code looks like. And then we'll try to see all our three key things which we have seen, like less code, then
Right.
compiler, and how the reactivity. All those how
Yeah.
those three things are implemented.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So let me share screen, and then we'll take it ahead. Okay, so now what you can see on the screen is a sample Svelte code which I have written just for the demo purpose. Now, what you can see
Right.
on the right hand side here is a simple form, and then there are different order items. So basically, there are three items like mangoes, apples, bananas. And what I'm really going to do is I'm just going to add quantity into it, and as I'm entering the quantity, my order total, tax, and my grand total is getting computed. So this is like a
Right.
classic reactivity feature. As I keep on entering, the dependent fields are automatically getting computed. And not only that,
Right.
as I'm entering the values in this quantity, my array on which this particular screen is based, that is also getting updated. So this is like
Mm.
there are two things which are happening here. One is the state is getting maintained. So as I'm changing the value, that is getting updated, and the values are getting computed.
Right.
So now we will see how much amount of code one has to write to implement this feature. Now here you can see how typically a Svelte component looks like. So there is a script tag. So here inside there is JavaScript, which all of us are familiar. Then
Hmm.
below that, it's like our typical HTML, which we are all very familiar with that. So it's like a
Hmm.
whatever form you can see on the right hand side, the same HTML is there. Only thing is
Okay.
that there are some additional constructs which are Svelte specific, which are used to actually generate those repeated items in the table. But otherwise, it's fairly straightforward. Now, this reactivity which you have observed, like as I start typing, the values are getting updated. So this is the only one line of code which is doing that. So here you can see this bind value and this order item dot quantity. So as I change quantity, my just by this particular single line of code is taking care of updating my array directly. So you don't have to write any
Okay.
complex boilerplate code for that. Fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
And
So
then
typically, whatever JavaScript we would have to write otherwise to use by using a
yeah.
library or
So it
framework,
is
that kind of
absolutely,
vanishes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So not only
Okay.
just JavaScript, but the complex API calls in the library which one has
Hmm.
to make, or maybe in case of React, one has to use hooks to do that. That is
Correct.
absolutely not there, or you don't have to call
Hmm.
any set functions for state, etc. So here,
Hmm.
this particular item array, order items array is getting updated. Now this item array is actually coming as a parameter from another component. So very similar to
Okay.
React components. So here I have defined this array and it is going as a parameter, nothing more than
Okay.
that. So the real
Okay.
action is in this component itself, and this is like your typical JavaScript array which is getting updated as I start typing it here. So that's how very less code which one has to write. And then another interesting thing is this automatic calculations of amount and taxes. So this particular code is getting executed whenever the value is getting changed. So what it is really doing as I'm typing the quantity, it is actually computing the sum of quantity into price. So for each item, it is multiplying price and quantity and then summing up. And then there is some basic if else logic for calculation of tax. So if order amount is greater
Yeah.
than 500, then 10%, and less than 5%. So the key
Hmm.
thing, if you can observe here, is nowhere there is a call to any API call. Simply manipulation of
Correct.
JavaScript variable. And the moment I change here, something is getting changed in order tax, that is simply getting reflected here. So that this is the power of Svelte. So very
So
less code.
just equal to assignment is what you're
Absolutely, it's
doing.
like a
No
JavaScript language. In fact,
APIs.
that's what they
Yeah.
say. Like we are bringing language,
Hmm.
the whole code, the UI reactivity code is very similar to what we all are familiar with a simple JavaScript language. So
Hmm.
that's the power of Svelte. And then
Okay.
whatever we have written here. So I'm not going to go into this syntax, but then all this thing will be compiled at the time of build time, and then this JavaScript, the Svelte will generate. So this is actual thing which is getting executed. What you see on the left hand side is like this component description or the basic script which is there as a part of the component. So this compilation which we talked, so this is what the compilation is doing. It is taking this my component code and converting into a JavaScript. So again, to quickly summarize, very easy to implement reactivity, compiling the code, and very less code because it's very similar to language and hardly any boilerplate. So these are, I think, the three very
Correct.
important things about Svelte.
Perfect. Perfect. In fact, the generated JavaScript did appear to be complex, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's
absolutely.
going to be
I've not
complex.
even looked
But
into that.
right.
It's fairly
But you
complex.
and
Yeah,
me as developers are saved by
absolutely. We
from
don't have to
going into
worry
that.
about
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. Okay.
yes.
Got it. That's nice. I'm nice. I think this example explains a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So the example is interesting, and it kind of explains what we are you're trying to mention so far. In terms of the benefits.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is great. But still, what are our final words? What should we say? What kind of a caution would you like to also give to the
Yeah,
users who are considering it against, let's say, something like React, which is well established, well proven?
absolutely, absolutely. I think typically it's not an easy answer, but I feel that by looking at the current state of Svelte, probably if you already have a project in React, then it may not be a good idea to migrate it to this new framework. But maybe if you are starting absolutely from scratch and then you have time available to learn this framework, the learning curve is not that steep. then you can definitely look at this as an option. So maybe for new project, yes, one can definitely consider that. Another important point which we have to keep in mind is, as far as Svelte is concerned, uh, it's a it's an open source community backed framework, and compared to, let's say, Angular or React. Now React, there is a Facebook behind it. In case of Angular, there is a Google behind it, and at least presently behind Svelte there is no large corporation. So maybe I think that's one point which one has to keep in mind. Then another thing which is there, it's recently about, I think in the last week, Svelte has launched something called as Svelte Kit, which is like a next level of framework. What they call it as a
Hmm.
meta framework to implement, develop applications using web. So maybe only
Okay.
Svelte may not be a good choice, but I think Svelte 1.0, the kit which is there, that could be really a good choice for developing web applications.
Hmm. Okay. Correct. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. Right. I think this news of Swell Kit also kind of, I was reading about it, and I think I felt when you combine both together, you will have sufficient power to build a full-fledged enterprise class application, probably.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact,
Hmm. Okay.
I think maybe very soon we will. I'm going through that SvelteKit 1.0, so maybe we can have
Yeah.
a separate discussion on
Let's do
SvelteKit
a session. Yeah.
1.0
Let's
and
do
not.
a
Yeah,
session on
yeah,
that. Yeah. Exactly. Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I think this is good, crisp introduction to what Svelte is, and everyone can kind of go through it, get more had their hands more dirty, build more confidence, and then contemplate whether it's kind of worth jumping into, right?
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So it's a great framework and very good. It's a different way of developing web applications. So I think it's very promising framework.
Promise.
But I think
Absolutely
lots of
promising.
things will depend upon whether you have developers available whenever you are planning for your product or a project release. And compared to that, I
Yeah.
think there are a lot of React developers are comparatively easily available. So maybe
Exactly.
for a new project, people may still go with React. But I think in coming days, probably we'll have to keep on observing this technology. So
Yeah.
definitely, it has a great promise.
Yeah. Okay. That was wonderful, Prasad. Thanks for taking us through this quick ride on Svelte. And
Thanks,
viewers, thanks a lot. Yeah, bye, and keep watching and stay subscribed.
yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye. Thanks everybody for watching. And if you like this video, please share this video to your friends, colleagues, and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Thank you very much.